Alright guys, it's been a long time since I made a tutorial, but since it's Christmas I thought I'd give you guys a little treat. This is just a quick video on how I do sort of dubby chords, and these are really useful for like loads of different genres including dubstep, but in this example I've put them into a sort of dubby type techno track. So this is the sound we're going to be making. Quite a nice dubby sound, and here's what it sounds like in the context of a sort of short loop. I've also made this sound so that I can modulate it a bit with the mod wheel to give it a bit of movement. Cool. So what I'd usually do is take you guys all the way through making the sound from scratch, but since it's Christmas and I'm full of turkey, I can't really be bothered to do that. So what I'm going to do is show you the patch and take you through some of the modulations and how and why I made them. First thing I'm going to do is take off the tape delay and reverb on this sound. Obviously it's nice to have that sort of atmospheric echoey sound for dubby chords, but when we're working with the synth patch it's best to work dry so that we can hear what we're doing. So what I'm going to do is disable a lot of the modulations in the ES2's router, by clicking the bypass button, which is sometimes a bit fiddly to hit. And what that will give us is basically our sound at its most basic form, which is a triangle wave. As you can see, that triangle wave is actually not mixed in at all into the sound. It's an octave and a perfect fifth above the other oscillators, and the reason it's not mixed in is that later I'm going to use a modulation which mixes it in using an envelope, and I've got that sort of high thing to give it a sort of malletty sound at the attack of the sound, so you'll hear that later on. Apart from that, I've got a square wave tuned down an octave and a digiwave. As always, it's up to you to go through the digiwaves and choose the ones with textures that you like. So here's what a sound sounds like with just the cutoff filter being modulated by envelope 2. So what our envelope is doing here, as you can see, is it's got no attack, so this modulation will cause over time what the filter will be doing is this. No attack, so as soon as the key is hit it will instantly jump up like that. Then the decay is 330 milliseconds and the sustain is 0.6, so over the course of 330 milliseconds the filter will go down like that to 0.6 of its top value, and then it will, once I release the key, take quite a long time to release back down to its normal level. That modulation is going via the mod wheel, so basically what that means is that the mod wheel controls the intensity. So if the mod wheel is all the way down, the filter might just go up to here, then down here for the sustain, and then back. But with the mod wheel up, it might jump all the way up here, which means that when we pull up the mod wheel, the attack of our sound gets brighter, which is obviously what we're after. It's having lots of harmonics coming through at the attack of the sound often is what gives the sound its character and allows it to punch through. So for dubby chords we want quite low filter settings because that sort of, it sounds like they're sort of underwater, you know, really sort of atmospheric dubby sound, but it's nice to have the control with the mod wheel of bringing that up and letting more harmonics through for, you know, just to give the sound movement basically. So the next modulation I've got is another cutoff modulation, and what this does is it uses the keyboard to determine the filter. That means that if I play higher up on the keyboard, the filter will open up more, and if I play lower down it'll be very low. So a low note naturally will have fewer harmonics higher up in the spectrum, but it's also in this case got the filter down lower, so that's what a low note sounds like, and a high note sounds like this. So as you can hear, the filter's being opened up quite a bit just by me just mapped to the keyboard. So if I play higher up, I get more higher harmonics. The next two modulations are modulations again using that same principle, using the map to the keyboard, but I'm actually modulating the waves of oscillators 2 and 3. So for oscillator 2, that means that as I get higher up the keyboard, the pulse width, which is what this knob controls, the pulse width of that square wave will change. This isn't really the time or place to discuss stuff about pulse width modulation, but if you look that up, you'll find that it's quite a handy tool, and it can just change the texture of the sound. The reason I've used all these modulations here is just to give the sound more texture and change as it moves up and down the keyboard. For me, it's details like that that make the character of sounds much more interesting, and which sort of make them stand out from the crowd. We could make quite simple dubby chords just using maybe three saw waves or something, and lots of artists do that. But I like to mix in a bit of secret sauce just to make my sounds a bit more interesting. The next modulation is one of oscillator 1 level with envelope 1, which is just a decay, a very short decay. And that's what I was talking about before, where that will mean that as the sound attacks, the mix triangle will go like that. Bing. So that means as the sound attacks, we'll get more of those high harmonics coming through. This is, like as I said, an octave and a fifth above, so quite a bit higher. So it's quite a subtle effect, but if I play higher up with the filter open a bit, as I say, quite subtle, but it gives it that sort of bing on the attack, which I think fits in nicely with the sound, especially when the again, that happens more when the mod wheel's up. Finally, I've got envelope 3's release changed with the mod wheel. So as I pull the mod wheel up, the release on the amplitude, that's on the volume, goes up. So essentially, if I make that modulation a bit more intense and less subtle, so that's with the mod wheel up, that's with the mod wheel down. So it changes the sort of shape of the sound, the shape of the amplitude of the sound. Apart from that, I've got unison mode turned on, which, as you might know, doubles up the oscillators. You get more voices playing at once, and I've got the analog mode pulled up. That means that those different voices will be slightly detuned from each other automatically, and that gives a sort of width, fatness, and it makes it sound like an analog synthesizer. Although, to be honest, it doesn't do a great job. If you really want an analog synth, you could spend a lot of money on it. So that's the basics of our sound. I'm going to go back to how it was when I opened the file. The only other two things that I've added for atmosphere are the tape delay and this reverb. Usually in Logic I use, get rid of the ES2, I use Space Designer for reverbs. It's got a much more natural character, but in this case I actually quite like the Platinum Verb. It's got a much more digital, synthetic quality to it, and I kind of quite like that for these dubby chords. As for the tape delay, I mean, tape delay is the classic dub sound, so it's pretty natural that we want that on this sound. And what I like to do is I can play about with the settings of that to get different rhythms coming through. And even though if you play about with the settings of the delay as it's playing, you get these little artifacts, like these little noises like that. I mean, you can do careful automation or sampling or whatever to get rid of those if you like, but in some instances I actually kind of quite like those, and they give some weird atmospheric effects, especially when they're going through that reverb. Again, another little tip for this tape delay is that I like to put some distortion on the delays. So those second and third taps, the delays afterwards, get distorted, and it gives it a kind of crunchy, old school dub vibe. So again, I'll take that back to what it was. So overall, that's the sound. Quite simple. It's all about the very low filters. It's all about using the mod wheel or something to modulate that filter a little bit, and it's all about having the thickness from the unison and playing about with different octaves, different tunings and things on your oscillators, and different digiwaves, different pulse widths and so on. So this is like a very general look at chords and Dubby chords basically, but I hope it's been useful. Cheers guys.